Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales of Fantasy, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called The Magical Human Paradox, written by What Am I Doing 170. We don't know how humans are able to do magic. Unlike elves, they don't have a soul nexus to draw magical power from. They don't have strong enough souls to channel surrounding magic through like the dwarves do. They can't connect to ley lines, and those with magical ancestry and lineage are considered the outliers. According to all known laws of arcane, humans, with their non-magical anything, shouldn't be able to perform magic. Of course, humans do, and we don't know how or why. The only way for a mundane creature to perform magic is by soul exchange, a process almost never done because in exchange for a spell or magical act done, the user permanently damages their soul. This would be the only horrible explanation for human magic. And yet, when we look at the souls of human mages, we find nothing. No damage, no scars, no harm done. The only logical explanation is that human souls are incredibly resilient. But they aren't. Other human soul studies show that human souls are just as durable as any other sapient creature, actually being a little bit more fragile. They shouldn't be able to do a soul exchange and come out unscathed, but they just seem to. This is a magical human paradox. Humans have no way to perform magic, but they do. The only method they could use magic with would mangle their souls, but their souls stay intact. For the longest time, the magical human paradox has puzzled arcane scholars. It has become one of the most common debates amongst academics, and an entire branch of study was created to try and answer it, but nothing concrete has come of it. Several theories have been made, with the most popular being the Spectre Familiar theory. It states that humans somehow become attached to spiritual beings that perform magic for them. This theory first came about when a fairy tried to possess a human via astral projection. When she came upon a sleeping child, something else was there. A human-looking being hovering just over the child and clinging to them, its spectral form fading into smoke like wisps, and only its top half visible. The rest tapered off into something like a tail that connected to the human soul with a small cord. Its empty glare bore into the fairy, and its wispy fingers curled into the human's shoulder. The fairy tried, but the possessive thing would not let her, and it defended its claim. At first, many thought this was a manifestation of the child's own soul protecting herself. But that was quickly disproven, as although the figure appeared similar to the child physically, it wasn't exactly the same. It even appeared older and male of all things. All soul projections are exact copies of the being doing it, and this phenomenon wasn't a quirk of humanity. Every time a soul projects, they look the same as their body, so it wasn't another weird human exception. After more recordings of similar occurrences, the theory came that a spirit became attached to a human soul, and that's how they do magic. Of course, this answer only bore more questions. All spirits look like mythical creatures, and there are certainly no human-looking ones. Spirits don't just change their form to resemble a random human. The spirit realm claims no knowledge of something like this happening, but the spirit realm is notorious for being misunderstood and elusive. Then there was the fact that humans themselves had no idea about this. The parents of that girl, after coming down on the fairy, were convinced that a demon or something was cursing their child and would kill their girl as it killed their son. The girl had no knowledge either, and every human with a similar thing is as clueless as the rest of us. This becomes even more puzzling because the being is actually attached to the human soul. When another race becomes so intrinsically tied to your very being, it becomes an unforgettable, life-changing experience. We know this because it has happened before. Humans who have soul bonds with other races go through this exact phenomenon, but somehow not with these beings. And so the answer to the magical human paradox eludes us again. Many thought there wouldn't be an answer, that this was just one of the mysteries of the universe. It was like that for millennia. Little did we know that the Spectre/Familiar theory wasn't too far off. being somewhat right and somewhat wrong. The answer to the nature of human life, ironically, came from a necromancer. This century's big bad necromancer saw that killing living people and using their souls angered everybody else. That led to the collective downfall of the all would-be conquerors before him. To his credit, he tried to kind of learn from history and instead decided to use the souls of the already dead. Since he wouldn't get as much power, especially killing them, he would sublimate by punching a hole into the afterlives of all the races and take surplus of souls from there. This proved to be much more effective than previously thought, and his power grew exponentially once he got into the first afterlife. Armies were raised, fell, battles fought and lost as the necromancer was starting to seem like he could actually be the one to take over the world. He might have, if he didn't try to open the human afterlife. The necromancer saw the human afterlife as not immediately essential, as human souls weren't as powerful, as so he conquered 5 afterlives beforehand, then moved on to humans. Souls were still powerful though, and he could not contain afterlife of one of the major races. So after defeating an army with the enslaved ghosts of their tormented friends and family, the necromancer stepped into the human afterlife and found nothing. Not a single soul or ghost occupied the afterlife. There weren't any other afterlife or realm. He checked. They weren't hiding in another plane of existence. They weren't anywhere. Naturally, the necromancer freaked out, and humanity freaked out even more when they learned that they had no idea where they would go after they died. Eventually, a boy from a small village convinced a lot of humans that the necromancer had actually destroyed the human afterlife, and that they needed to fight him to get it back, or repair it, or make another one, depending on who you asked. Well, this wasn't true. It did make for a good rallying cry. Those who hid and didn't fight didn't have anything to go then, and so the great human countries united in war against a common enemy once again and sailed off to the scarcely human-populated continent where the necromancer was. When they arrived and fought, the necromancer used his magic to reveal all deceased souls on the battlefield, then draw them towards him to empower himself in his usual army morale-killing move. This time things were different. The souls of the deceased showed up, flickering into sight with white transparency like all the other races, and cast their soft ethereal light upon the physical world. The battlefield lit up brightly, too brightly, way too much, so much ghost light that they outshone the stars and the moon, and the midnight battle was lit up like they were in broad daylight, maybe more even. This was too much for the at most hundreds of humans killed at the beginning. There were too many souls than the amount of those who just died. Not thousands, not millions, but billions of human souls were there. They made a mass haunting look like an ant colony in comparison. As if every soul from every human death since the beginning of humans was right there. Because they were exactly that. All of the souls that should have been in the human afterlife were there, fighting alongside their descendants. The necromancer tried to use them against humanity, but not a single human soul was drawn in. He tried again and again, because the only thing that could possibly resist him was if a soul was permanently tethered to the world through a long and arduous ritual, something that took days to do, maybe hours if rushed. There was no way an army could attach their souls that fast shortly after dying. You can't do that beforehand because your soul is already attached to your body, and to link it with something else means severing the soul from the body, which is the definition of death. The only other way for a soul to remain in the world without a physical connection was to be consumed by such a strong emotion that they would not pass on until the emotions are satisfied. Your classical hauntings and unfinished business. The confusion of the battle made us assume it was the latter. That every single human soul that was so pissed at the necromancer, they defied their afterlife just to mess him up. Not a perfect explanation, but there was a war and nobody had time to think. After 2 years of all the races fighting, the necromancer was defeated, and his soul was so scattered and defiled that it wasn't a soul anymore, and now was just a wisp of universal energy. When that day came, everybody sort of expected for the dead humans to return to their afterlife. But they didn't. The war had revealed many things about them and humanity, and this afterlife refusal was the final nail in the coffin to the magical human paradox. The dead humans didn't remain because of strong emotions. If that were the case, then they would only be able to display those feelings. But the human souls showed a wide range of different emotions, a level they could only be at if they were tethered, because they were. Every single human that ever lived, had probably ever will, had tethered themselves to humanity. The human afterlife was empty because each soul would rather stay with the living. Humans could do magic because they were soul exchanging, but not with their own souls. The souls of the previously dead humans would instead take the burden willingly, and when the damage just started to become enough to hinder them, another soul would take their place. Billions of human souls in reserve ensured that every single human alive would have a guardian looking after them. Those who weren't tied to one human in particular were still there, tethered to humanity itself, either waiting to take someone's place or had already done so and were now watching over their kind. Humans had no idea this was happening because while soul bonding with another race is borderline traumatic, they weren't bonding with another race, they were bonding with themselves. Those newly killed in war were basically dogpiled by other souls until they could tether themselves to a human. The necromancer spell allowed the souls to stay corporeal for a little while afterwards, enough time for one or two questions. Through the myriad of endless souls, we couldn't find the first, but we did hear about them. How, when the first human died, they saw the lonely road to the afterlife, looked back to see who they would have left behind, and didn't. Not a single human has been or will ever be alone, in life or death. When the end of time comes or humanity ceases, they will go into the beyond, and they will all go together. End of story. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons, Dragzoon WRE, Quantum Wednesday, Ambrose Cattell, Lord Ashrakal, Bushmaster 177, Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.